The next question is, how can looking at our marketing options help us to increase our goals? To answer this question, our next presenter has spent over 30 years working in extension and research roles in the sheep and beef industry. He has extensive experience in advising producers in feeding, animal health and managing cattle, including drought feeding, and has developed quite a reputation for being an expert in marketing options for beef cattle. Tim currently manages red meat value chain projects in the beef and sheep area. Tim has also previously travelled as far as Perth to watch the Sydney Swans, so he didn't actually have to get up too early this morning, as he's a local that hails just from Rutherglen. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for that. Very much thank you for the invite to speak. What I'm going to go through today is, you probably could do a year course on it at uni on some marketing things with a bent towards the beef production. So I'll just touch on a lot of things, and hopefully, if I've done my job, I'll leave you with a few thoughts to further investigate on where we might be going in the future. The overview, I basically want to touch on marketing versus selling, a bit around market options, a bit around the influences that are occurring now and over the next 5 years that are going to impact how we may sell and what the market's going to do regards beef. Ben's touched on some of those things, but I'll add a couple of extra things there. Understanding market requirements, managing your cattle to meet the market, and a bit of a summary. So the big issue for me is we're probably coming from a history of selling. Versus moving to an area where we're marketing. Marketing versus selling. Selling being where we produce a product traditionally, and then we think it's ready to go. We put it up for sale, and we're a price taker. We take what is actually somebody's willing to offer it for us. Whereas marketing is more about understanding the product a bit more, understanding the consumer and the customer a bit more, and then trying to meet their demands and market that, and hopefully maximise a return for effort for doing that. Just touch on a few of the marketing options. Touch on saleyards, obviously a major component in Victoria. Still a significant number of animals go through saleyards. It's a bit below 70%, I believe, at the moment. Queensland, you talk about 20% of animals going through saleyards, but saleyards still have a big role to play in marketing options. The pros for them, it's a competition that can be provided there, but it's particularly an option when you look at Victoria and lot sizes. How to deal with small lot sizes and how do you bring large numbers together. We talk about Queensland, we talk about tray truck loads, semi-loads, B-double loads of cattle that are all one consignment, whereas Victoria, it's a lot smaller lot sizes, and thus the ability to lot animals up and meet processors and feedlotters' needs may go through the saleyard. Paperwork is managed a bit more effectively through the saleyards, and you have the options, your agents and other components within that system to help you actually get the paperwork right. When you actually go away from the saleyards, the obligations are actually on you as producers to actually get the paperwork right around NLIS and reconciling your accounts to make sure the figures actually balance, and we're not real flash at doing that at times. And a big positive of saleyards is the social aspect, coming together. There is a cost issue around saleyards. There's a cost in actually marketing those animals and putting them in that position. There's also, because you're bringing animals into an area, an impact on meat quality, because we're actually extending the market chain by putting them through a saleyard, and that may have a negative impact on meat quality, and perceptions around the same thing on animal welfare. And is a central point where somebody might have an issue around or looking for issues around animal welfare where they are attracted to, because that's where accumulation of things happen at the saleyard. But we've seen the saleyard industry do a fair bit of work to try and minimise some of these issues, and as we've seen with new yards, with undercover, with better flooring and a whole range of issues they're trying to address. Auctions Plus, selling over the internet. Huge growth in it in recent years. We're seeing more of them going out there, electronic sales. But the big driver behind this one is you need to assess your animals correctly. And there's been quite a few cases where there's been the big challenge on animals that have not been described, and people have purchased them and they're not been described properly, and the ramifications of they're not buying what they actually thought they were buying, and a whole lot of legal issues come out of those sort of points. So make sure that the skill base in actually describing your animals is better, but one of the big benefits, the animals don't leave home until they're sold. And it's not as big an issue now, but I heard some classic stories in the early days about people buying stores over the electronic bail sales system and thought they got a good deal, but the sheep happened to be sitting on the Nullarbor Plain. It's a fair way to cart them to East Gippsland. So you've got to actually make sure that those sort of issues are interesting. Other methods, direct sale methods, paddock sales, we still have those out there, private sales, but realising that whenever you do it, as I mentioned before, we've got to reconcile your NLIS account. Feedlots and their purchase, and we're seeing more and more feedlots buying direct from farm to hope to improve the ability of those animals to get on feed when they get at the feedlot and get performance out of them. Over the hooks trading, which provides pricing grids, and we'll touch a bit more on that. We need to understand the language there, and the real growth, as we're seeing, is branded product. We're seeing more and more of the industry looking at branded product. When we look at it, commodity versus high-valued product. The Australian beef industry, I think, is really much in the high-valued product area. Commodity is still important, still a huge grinding beef market into the US in particular, but you saw the figures from Ben, the growth in chilled product going to the US. That's higher valued, higher potential net returns for everybody in the chain if it's done well. And it puts us in a better spot against our major world competitors. Just quick touching on a point here, there's a lot of confusion sometimes in the market between what people describe as dressing percentage versus yield. And you'll hear this term used all the time, whereas somebody's talking yield and they're talking dressing percentage and vice versa, and confuse the market considerably. Live weight down to hot standard carcass weight is your dressing percentage, and is what most producers are thinking about and considering. But actually the market's looking at retail saleable meat yield or retail yield, which is different breaking down or the removal of the fat trim and bone and components out of the market. Understanding the difference between those two describers, and to give you a bit of an understanding, dresser percentage is that hot standard carcass weight divided by live weight, or the live animal multiplied by the dressing percentage. And as rough estimates, these vary a lot, and rough estimates as they are, because you need to understand what's happened to those animals to understand the dressing percentage, the rounded curfew, a whole range of issues that come into play there. But steers around 54%, heifers around 52%, and I won't let any questions on that at this stage because there's bound to open a debate on dressing percentages. But when you're sourcing cattle that meet market specs, it's critical to challenge. A critical challenge for the buyers is actually trying to source the animals they need there. Marketing over the hooks, they're sold an agreed price, cents per kilo carcass weight, via a pricing grid. The grid system are calculated using a whole range of parameters. The standard ones have been hot standard carcass weight and fat depth, but you'll also have age come into play there, muscle score, other parameters coming into under specific programs, and they'll influence the price. You can maximise your price by hitting the target, but there are penalties or discounts associated with missing the target. And if you get involved, as we progress more and more people to these systems, they need to understand the system they're getting into and can actually really maximise the benefits. And we did some work a couple of years ago where without changing your price, but better hitting the target, you can have a 10% improvement on the bottom line of your returns for your cattle. And I think the figures can even be higher than that with some of the stuff out there, and we'll hear some information a bit later about some feedback systems that might help you get a better understanding of that are on the drawing board. Understanding grids and feedback sheets. So missing target specifications, as I mentioned, has a potential to result in large discounts. Assessing live animals is a vital skill to have. It's something that really need to develop and hone. And agents and buyers are good at this because they're putting lots of animals through and assessing them. As producers, we've got to develop those skills too. Or actually employ the skill base to actually allow you to describe the animals effectively. So then becomes a role of how you build your team to market your animals. All processors and feedlots provide feedback sheets, varying degrees of how good that information and the quality of it, and sometimes you've got to ask pretty hard to get it if you get it, but the reality is we're getting towards some systems now that actually will provide feedback, and getting feedback and making use of it and analysing your performance can really have an impact on your bottom line. And we've done some work where we've had supply chains that are down to 75% compliance or even lower, which means there's a huge amount of discount, and the processors or the feedlotters, if they're not getting the animals they want, they've got to buy more. And guess what? They'll discount the price of those extra animals they've got to buy across the whole lot. They've got to buy and working out their pricing. So everyone pays. So maximising your returns is something that is important in knowing the information. And yeah, the more you do it, the more you'll be able to identify things that you can do better and improve your compliance. Further influences. What are the other things out there influencing the market? Strength of the global beef market. We just heard about that from Ben. I won't go into that. I've mentioned commodity versus value added and where the industry is going with that. And I think value added is becoming more and more a greater component of the Australian sector and how we're going to compete against our major international competitors like Brazil and Argentina. Growth of branded product. We're just seeing more and more branded product out there and thus the associated higher values for those products and thus hopefully the return. And the difference between supply chain versus value chain is that in the supply chain you're just a component of the chain and how information's moved. A value chain is meant to be sharing of information, sharing of knowledge, stronger relationships and sharing of value. Now that sounds very holistic and mother, but the potential is there, and to be honest with you, I've been involved in a few projects at the moment that we're actually seeing that actually happening for once, whereas it used to be rhetoric that I used to always say, and I copped a fair bit of mud throwing at times because of that, but that actually is the changing face of our industry. Increased emphasis on traceability. We're seeing more and more of it at the moment. Where the pressure's only going to come stronger and stronger around traceability, and the information you provide about the animals that you produce is going to become more important and the ability to be able to trace them. We've got a BSE case in Ireland at the moment that's impacting on the European market, and we've got a whole lot of issues happening around foot and mouth disease and access to the US market at the moment that can really impact how our industry might go. So understanding some of those things, understand where their market might go. And sustainable beef production. There's a lot of discussion right around the world about how do we actually have the information to verify that our systems are sustainable. And when I mean sustainable, I'm not just talking about environmentally sustainable, I'm talking about social. That's around animal welfare and a whole range of issues there, and financial. Doing the things to make your business viable that John was talking about earlier. Big one that you might have seen a bit at the moment, China live export. What's that going to mean? There's still a lot of unknowns about this one, but it's got huge potential as a market for slaughter cattle. Australia and China are just agreeing at the moment on protocols on this happens, and everyone jumps to, oh, live export, that's a Northern Australian issue, particularly when you look at Indonesia. But guess what? This is what was in Beef Central last week. The opportunities for the southern states, and they're going to want British bred, European bred type cattle for this market. And that's where the potential is. How do you actually meet those requirements? Understanding blue tongue, understanding the impacts of that on and an issue not down here, but what does it mean for you in actually trading with people who are buying for the Chinese market? This is the information you're going to have to come across and understand. There's a lot of stuff there, and that link there through Beef Central is there to understand the information, but I think this has become more and more important if you are going to be interested in this market for the future, and it will have an impact on the beef sector, well and truly. Another interesting one, this was in Food Business News recently. Walmart are changing their rules on what they want suppliers to meet their supermarket requirements. Walmart's the biggest supermarket in the world by far, and guess what? When they do something, most of the other supermarkets tend to follow suit over time. And they're not making it mandatory, but you don't actually supply them unless you start providing information about use of antibiotics, the use of HGPs, the use of a whole range of different issues that they're important on. Now, some of these things we're already doing, but realising the pressure's going to come on for more and more information that we have to have the records to back up to supply these markets as they're going forward. I reckon there's three areas of criteria that I put down as important in the market. Market factors, quality factors and value-added factors. The market factors are very much the ones that dictate which market we might send our animals to. Historically, they've been around live weight, fat score, and the important one that we don't often look at is the maturity pattern. What are the type of animals you're breeding? Are they suitable for the market you're trying to meet to? And can you actually ever get them to hit the specs of the market you're trying to get to? It's becoming more and more important. And within maturity pattern, you can even add in muscle score there. So if we look at a growth curve of a typical bovine, that's a calf, they're laying down bone. There's a general greater percentages going into bone. Stage 2 or grow out phase is around muscle, and stage 3 is around fat. But how that means in the maturity pattern is that it's following a genetic imprint that's influenced by the nutrition of the animal and reflects the weight and fatness of a given age of an animal, is the maturity pattern. The maturity type is very much can be categorised individual types, Early maturing animals are shorter bodied and at a given age than later maturing types. And when you look at past, young animals grow lean and fast. At 60% of mature weight, growth slows and the animal begins to fatten. And beyond that physiological maturity point, it's largely fat to lay down. It's a lot more costly and is not as efficient as the muscle growth. But what's important is being able to describe those animals and understanding what category your cattle might be in, and even having a measuring point. As you see, there's a little photo down in the corner there. And most feedlots will have a measuring tape stuck to the side of the crush so they can actually get a measurement to work out that pin height of the animal, to work out a maturity score of the animals they're buying. And they've got requirements on that. Particularly feedlots are very big on this one, but most markets are starting to looking at it regard and understanding the maturity type. And for you to manage your animals and their potential to hit the specifications and turn them off at the time you want to turn them off becomes important to understand maturity pattern. And to give you an example, they're same aged animals, different breeds, and you can see a fairly different variation on being on the same nutrition, bit of variation there between breeds. And even more so, it's an old slide, but this was a trial that we run a few years ago for the Hereford Society, and these are all born within a week of each other. Different genetics, same feed the whole life, and very different looking animals even though they're all Herefords. And understanding maturity pattern of those genetics is important. So as an animal, as growth curves, as frame size increases, larger framed animals grow to a higher maturity weight. They take longer to reach that maturity, so they're later finishing. And we'll see that with a lot of, as general trends. It does depend on genetics, but you'll see that with European blood cattle. When we look at muscling, heavily muscled animals take longer to fill out their muscling. They carry more muscle and less fat later in life. And lightly muscled animals finish muscle growth earlier and put on and then put surplus fat in. So changing the growth curves, if you change the nutrition, what's the impact? And you can see there, better nutrition animals, full development of bone and muscle. Vealers at 7 to 10 months can be turned off at that good growth rate with good nutrition. But if we have a restriction, which happens commonly in our Mediterranean environment, what's the impact of that? We impair bone and muscle development. We won't get a catch up with that when those animals are put on good feed. Compensatory growth gain was a thing when I first went through uni, was a big thing. The reality is we don't actually get as much out of compensatory weight gain as we first thought. We will not return an animal with a significant check back to where they might have got to with their genetic blueprint if they've been fed well all the way through. Animals will be lighter weight, less muscle, more fat. Do the same with between weaning and 18 months and put the checks on those, and you can see up there they'll produce higher quality pastures needed in there to actually produce them, but we have better quality finished carcasses in relation to good nutrition. When we put a restriction on, we have an impact on the muscle fibres. We lay down less muscle. We reduce marbling potential. So we don't maximise the potential of that genetics of marbling that you might want for a particular market. And fat deposition, and marbling is an interesting one. We're seeing that being more and more important in more and more markets. It's not just the Japanese B3 market and the Japanese market that we're seeing. We're seeing marbling being important across a lot of markets at low levels. For most high-value product has got a percentage of market for eating quality, for flavour, for a range of things involved in it that the fat content becomes important. Fat deposition is delayed and animals will be leaner and higher yielding carcasses, but they'll actually be lighter. So and what's the biggest driver of what price return? That won't change rapidly. It's still the yield of those animals. The weight of those animals is actually the biggest driver. You get paid on weight and price, and now we're seeing more markets paying on eating quality, but it's still only a smaller component of the price. The idea is try and maximise all of it, get it all right. So look at animals. This is from some CRC work done a couple of years ago, but those animals at 15 months, that's what they look like at 30 months. They were checked to get them looking like that at 15 months, and then we put them on the same nutrition for the next 15 months and didn't see the speed up. So genetics come into play and we didn't get the compensatory growth that we were expecting. So faster post-weaning growth, finish animals younger. As customers continue to place pressure on weight for age, this will become more important. We're seeing more and more customers want heavier weight animals at younger ages. A quicker turn-off, increased profitability of the farm occurring with a shorter turn-off time, less time they're on the farm. All sectors, the breeders, the backgrounders, the finishers contribute to the economic production and the quality of the beef animal. It's really about understanding your specifications, know the growth parts of your animals, and trying to maximise your return when you're marketing. The quality factors, these have a direct influence on eating quality, and these are the things that probably get discussed a little bit. I think there's a session on eating quality a bit later, so I won't go into too much detail there, but the age of animals, their temperament, the impact on stress, breed, sex, previous history all becomes important to understand and know how you manage those animals will affect how the eating quality and how that product will eat in the end, and your management becomes very important. Value-added factors. These are a range of things that the customer, based on what the consumer quite often wants. Sometimes there's not really strong science on some of these things. Other things there's really strong science on why we should actually be meeting these needs. But we're going to see the growth in this area. We're seeing it now, we've seen it for the last 10 years, and we'll see it certainly over the next 5, if not 10 to 15 years, of more and more requirements of the information that you're going to underpin your product when you sell it to whatever to meet a customer's needs. And they're things that you can see. Quality assurance programs. LPA's out there now, but through our branded products we're seeing more in-depth quality assurance programs that people are supplying to. But we're also seeing some clear market signals from some of those branded products of the price you get for doing the work, and you can do the sums to see if it's worth your while to be involved or not. And in most cases it is. So that's the clear market signal, which is really important and has been missing a lot in the past when we're trading cattle, to really understand what the customer wants through the pricing signals that you get back from whoever you're selling to. Things like yard weaning's already out there. NVD's filled out properly. We still have major issues with that, a lot of mistakes on them. And the mistakes are fairly basic at times, but it's because of what you're actually registered at might not be what you fill a form in the name you use, the address you use, the phone numbers you use, and we get the number of animals wrong regularly on NVDs. Because the NVD's done the night before, and then guess what, when we're drafting them up, we drafted another animal out or added an extra 2 in or whatever else, and the figures never get changed. There's a problem with the system then, and in some markets that really will impact the ability to process those animals. Vaccination histories have become really important particularly for the feedlots. Knowing the genetics of your animals becoming important. Their structural soundness. How well do you prepare those animals for transport, and what information are you providing the customer of what you're doing. And things around dehorning, identification as we go forward. How well are you using electronic ID? It's a tool you've got to do, but there's actually some huge benefits in making that tool work for you. There's one out here, and I'll put it's an MLA product that's on their website, the Beef Specs Calculator. It's actually an interesting tool that I've used a bit too, and I think it's worthwhile. Certainly something to play with. It's a tool that you can add some information about your animals, your pasture system and your management, and get some predictions about at what time, at what weight those animals come off. So if you want to turn them off, now is August, and you want to turn them off in late October, you can punch the information relevant into this program, and it'll give you some predictions about whether those animals are ever going to make that turn-off point, or are they going to be, or you're too late, they're going to be too fat, or a whole range of issues like that. And it's obviously, I was going to say a word I probably shouldn't say about crap in, crap out, but if you don't have good information to put into the system, you'll get a funny result, but the better your information, the better the result. It's actually a tool developed by New South Wales DPI, Meat and Livestock Australia and the Beef CRC, and they're actually doing more work at the moment to try and develop the tool for feeder steers. And it's one that's no cost to you, if you're a member of MLA, to jump on that website, pull it down and make use of a tool that's very effective and of huge benefit, and a nice little thing to play around to see whether, when you think you want to sell, are your cattle ever going to make that idea, make that thought. So in order to meet market specifications, it really is know the specifications and the consumer requirements of your target markets. It's becoming more and more important to better understand who you're actually trying to sell to and what their requirements are. And that way you're in the position of strength in actually putting your animals forward, and your animals actually can be described to them that they look like they're going to meet their market, and they don't have to buy the animals and count on a 5 or 10% of non-compliance. If they can get high, or 20% of non-compliance or 30% of non-compliance, which certainly happens out there still now. State average is just on 70% of our compliance of our beef to specifications. So we've got a lot of room for improvement, and you all take a hit when you get a non-compliant animal. whether it's directly through when you're in direct supplying through the grid or prices paid even at a sale yard point because of the impacts of non-compliance on a processor. They've got to have a fire sale to get rid of that product, and they've got to buy more animals to actually meet their customer requirements to fill their orders. And so that has an impact on you. If you can give them good information to actually show that they don't have to do that, there's room to negotiate prices. Know how to assess and monitor the progress of live animals towards targets, so really monitoring your animals and knowing how they're performing, knowing what food have you got in front of them and how you're actually going to make it. You might have great aspirations, but guess what? If you haven't got the feed growth curve that John was talking about to meet that, you might not get the animals there. Manage your grazing system to achieve growth targets and seek the feedback and implement practices to improve your compliance rate. We've got a couple of projects where we're doing that in both the beef and sheep sector, and it's amazing, some simple things as even better drafting, some to fairly large things of changing genetics, really has got some impact on the bottom line of performance of hitting the market going forward. And some of them are fairly easy if it's just a better drafting and understanding that, yes, you had 50 steers in that mob, but there was only ever going to be 45 that were ever going to make the market, and it would have been better to send the other 5 somewhere else and only go with the 40 and not was always a better option, or the 45, sorry. So understanding all those sort of principles, strategies before you actually get to loading a truck. Manage your grazing system to achieve growth targets. Know how to assess and monitor the progress of your animals towards targets is always important. I think I've just touched on it. So I think it's really important in there. I'll get to a bit of a summary, and then if there's any time, I think I'm travelling for time. So with summary, in the summary of the points there, I think it's really important that you can do some simple selection techniques with your cattle, sometimes to improve your compliance rate and how do you market. And that's driven by understanding your customer and understanding what their needs are, and understanding that your customers' needs are nearly driven by their customers and the end consumer and what that might be. So the more you can understand that, is the better it is. Who you put yourself around you to help do those skills. As a beef producer, you've got to be an expert in a lot of different areas in the business. This might be an area you've got an interest in, and you can grow, develop your skills there, or it's a matter of how do you get a good skill around you, whether it be your agent, whether it be your consultant, who else it might be to actually help you do things right in marketing your animals. Because the bottom line of marketing is you don't want to actually put at risk the effort you'll put in getting the animals ready for market, and you want to maximise the return of those animals and not cop any penalties that might be associated with it. And as I said, I think that's where the growth's going to be. We'll still have sale yards out there, and we'll still have animals going through sale yards, but we'll see that, I think, a bigger swing towards store animals and smaller lots going through there. We're seeing the trend, and I think it will continue, of larger lines of animals going direct. On direct market requirements, and that's just a trend that's happening right across the world, and that will continue. Consider the factors need to get it right, and do the background work and make sure that you meet by those. Build the relationship with the customer, and whether it be a processor or a lot feeder, and grow that, make that. It's amazing. They're not the enemy. Sometimes you might feel they are. But actually developing the relationship might actually, because sometimes it's not price, it's preferred suppliership. It's actually getting your animals in when you want to get them in mid-spring, when everyone else is trying to get them in there, or late spring, and you actually get access because of your relationship and what you supplied in the past and the good information you provided. There are other benefits in that relationship than based around price. Price is the big one, but there's plenty of others. Understand your market and your customer, and also the consumer. Understand that bigger part of the market. And I might leave it there. Do you know that? No problem.